when rivers were highways. The St. Mary's River has always played a significant role in the activities, economics, and indeed the personality of Sault Ste. Marie and its residents. In fact, the first people who lived here that we know of by name, the Ojibwa or Anishinaabe, were here largely because of the rich fishery in the St. Mary's Rapids. And the first European explorers and settlers to visit came by canoe. That was in the mid-1600s approximately, and the river remained virtually the only way for travelers from any distance to arrive until the late 1800s, when the first railroad to serve the area was built. Although in our land-based travel of today, we may think of the river as a barrier to moving between Michigan and Ontario, that was not the case historically, when a large percentage of the population on both sides of the river had easy access to canoes and boats. In the early 1800s, the largely Native American settlement here lived on both sides of the river. In 1820, when the Lewis Cass expedition arrived with the intent to secure an agreement with the local Ojibwa about building a U.S. fort here, there was a real fear among the Ojibwa that a confrontation would break out. A contemporary description tells of how many of the women and children on this side of the river jumped in their canoes and made for safety on the north side. And from about 1875, there was a commercial ferry system, first for pedestrians and horse-drawn wagons, and later for cars and trucks. Many of the immigrants to Chippewa County, especially from Canada, arrived by steamboat, coming from southern Lake Huron ports like Collingwood and Owen Sound, Ontario. In the early 1850s, when the first lock was being built for ships to pass between Lake Superior and Lake Huron, many construction workers had to be brought in. They typically came by boat. A lithograph of the sidewheel steamer North Star is among the artwork held at the Chippewa County Historical Society. It was one of the ships that brought workers to the Sioux for the lock job. The ship was launched in early 1854, built specifically for the Detroit to Sault Ste. Marie run. I found an article in the Lake Superior Journal, which was published in Sault Ste. Marie at the time, telling of a trip from the Sioux to Detroit in October 1854, titled Quick Time. The North Star, on her last downbound trip, ran from this place to Detroit, a distance of 400 miles in 23 and a half hours, and used poor wood a part of the way at that. With good coal, it is believed she'll make the trip in 20 hours, or at the rate of 20 miles an hour. The Sioux route can now boast the fastest boat on the lakes. Each season, when the river froze, the ferries shut down for a period, and people crossed the ice by foot or by horse-drawn sleighs. Perhaps the toughest time was in the spring and fall. The ice was too thick for boats and too thin for boots. In April of 1934, travelers who were anxious to get the ferry running for the season used dynamite to help clear a lane through the ice. Dynamite. Art Booth and his crew of men who harvested ice and stored it for use in the summer were hired to cut a lane for the ferry. This is shown in the next photo. And if you look carefully, you might be able to spot a person in the distance walking to Canada. A newspaper report from early July of 1935 indicated that the ferry between the two Sioux had carried 24,870 automobiles across the river in the first 6 months of the year. A significant amount of foot traffic also crossed. In June of 1935 alone, 34,213 people utilized the ferry. Many were in cars, but when I put those two numbers together, I estimate that perhaps as many as 30,000 pedestrians crossed in the first 6 months of 1935. In the first 3 decades of the 20th century, the Sioux had an electric streetcar system. One spur went to the dock where the ferry loaded in those days, which also speaks to the significance of the foot traffic. By 1946, when the Sioux branch of the Michigan College of Mining and Technology opened at the site of Fort Brady on Easterday and Ryan Street, some of the pedestrian traffic was generated by Canadian students enrolled at the Sioux branch. This would have come to an end in 1962, when the International Bridge was opened for traffic. The interstate highway I-75 had only recently been completed between the Sioux and points to the south, and the bridge was a natural culmination of that effort. The busiest year for traffic across the bridge so far occurred in 1994, when over 3,600,000 vehicles crossed the bridge, which gives an average daily crossing total of almost 10,000 vehicles. The record number of vehicles to cross the ferries occurred August 18, 1962, just 2 months before the bridge opened, when 3,425 cars and trucks crossed the river. Well, I hope that went well, and I have a number of these stories. I hope that you enjoyed them, and if you did enjoy them, we would really like to hear from you with some comments, and perhaps you have some ideas of other things in history that you would like to hear about. Share them with us. I may not have the story already written, but boy, I love to do a little digging and see what I can find out.